Welcome to Baker Briefing, where we make news make sense. I'm Michael Emerson, the Harry and Hazel Chavon Fellow in Religion and Public Policy at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy in Houston, Texas. And I'm your guest host for this episode. Today we're exploring the blurred line between entertainment and influence, and how governments and entities around the world are using media in increasingly savvy ways to persuade audiences and shape public opinion. From social media to cartoons to street art, popular culture, it is and has long been used as a vehicle for political messaging. To discuss the ways in which political influence and propaganda is embedded in vehicles for culture and communication around the world, we are delighted to be joined by two experts from the Baker Institute, Stephen Lewis, who directs the China Studies program, and Brandon Zhang, a contributing expert within the program. Steve, Brandon, thanks so much for joining us today. And let's start here by setting the scene. If I could turn to you, Steve, how would you describe the political communication landscape today, say compared to 20 years ago? Didn't have social media or algorithm-driven content yet. So what media or entities were people influenced by then and now?
20 years ago, it was like another world. Especially if you're an American, political communication was much more campaign specific. In election years, you would get so much more political communication, not as much in other times. Now they're kind of like bleeding together. We almost have like eternal campaigns. It also is more diverse. If you think about the media back then, it'd be print matter, or newspapers. It would also be broadcast. Before Citizens United in 2010, it was a lot easier to find out who was sending you this stuff. Whereas, more recent elections, your mailbox is stuffed full of things. You're getting text messages, emails from all these people, and you have no clue. They're from organizations that do not actually have to reveal where they're getting their funding from. Finally, it was also more likely to be face-to-face. Political communication was more likely to be something that you would share with your friends, your social group. It could be at your church, temple, mosque. Religious places are big for sharing political information. Or it'd be people campaigning, coming door to door. But all the social media and actually AI in particular raises a possibility that interactions will be more online or even actual conversations with algorithms in the future. It won't be long before campaigns are actually employing these as well to answer questions voters might have, things like that. Brave new world, basically.
We think of platforms like TikTok now serving as global hubs for cultural exchange, not limited by space and time, seemingly. What role do you think that they're playing in spreading or even regulating political content? How do concerns about TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, and potential state influence factor into this idea of spreading or regulating political content?
There's kind of three problems with TikTok and social media in general. And for Americans, it's not just TikTok, which is very popular with younger people in particular, but actually YouTube is actually even more popular and also a major source of information. And so is Instagram. The difference being that those are owned by American companies, Google and Meta. So they don't worry us as much, or at least they shouldn't, we think. But TikTok, of course, is a Chinese company that was told you can't do this in China, so they left. Then they have training in the West. They came up with a new algorithm for how do you engage people with short videos and comments, and it just took off. It's very, very popular in the West, but also other parts. It's banned in China. There is like a domestic equivalent that the Chinese government does allow, but it's basically banned. But to come back to it, the three problems are you're worried about propaganda, outright, government campaigns to fool people. We're more worried about disinformation. A lot of American policymakers were concerned about TikTok, but our Congress didn't do too much until October 7th, when there was a lot of disinformation coming out about conflict in Palestine and Israel and really sparked concerns about anti-Semitism. But then another issue is actually just privacy and data. And this is particularly important because TikTok and Instagram are mainly accessed on your smartphone. And our smartphones, they have GPS. They follow us all around. They also have like lists of all of our friends and contacts. And increasingly, when we buy something, where maybe we're using Apple Pay, basically your smartphone is a way to peek into all of your movements, whoever you're with. So the privacy concerns and the data concerns are a very big issue. And finally, there's a whole question about psychological effects, especially for children. There's a lot of research suggesting that these can lead to kind of like pathologies, people having bad impressions of themselves. One of the things that is now under discussion, and supposedly President Trump and Xi Jinping, China's leader, have agreed to some type of outcome, and that is to separate out the data from TikTok and create a new company, which basically TikTok was already forming in Texas anyway, but now it's going to have 7 other companies and investors. Sounds like mainly people who are close to Donald Trump or have contributed to his campaigns will be buying into it. That company will be responsible for ensuring that all the data from TikTok users from America stays in America. Oracle is playing the lead role in that. The algorithm itself still belongs to ByteDance, but they're going to be basically like a firewall between the United States and China. But that doesn't really get to the question about state propaganda. In Twitter recently, or X as it's now called, when Elon Musk took this over, he reversed the position and said state actors, Chinese state actors like ambassadors, propagandists and everything, they had to be before identified as state actors. And Elon Musk took that away. So now you have like more influencers, but they're actually working for the Chinese government and other governments, but it's harder to know. And so the question is, will TikTok in the future also have that? What is more interesting is the question of influencers. Are there popular people who are pushing a political position? Our research in the China Studies program, we're now turning to looking at the way that mainly local governments in China are hiring influencers to promote, in this case, local development. So coming out of COVID, our economy's bad, tourism is down. We want foreigners to return to Shenzhen in the city, or Shanghai, or Chengdu, or Chongqing, one of these big cities. So they have like connected with young people from all over the world who are into TikTok or Instagram. The central government has picked up on that and said, hey, all local governments need to kind of do that. My suspicion is the central government realizes that nobody's going to pay attention to a central government leader on any of the social media. And so they're looking for, in other words, more familiar, or in other words, cuter faces to try to influence people.
It's so interesting because influencers, a new category of a job that has arisen right with social media, that these are people we typically think, well, they make their money because companies say, hey, we'll pay you a certain amount to advertise our product, but it would work for politics too. So Brandon, if I could turn to you, you open a recent paper with a really compelling question. What do the Catholic Church, the U.S. Marine Corps, and the Japan Racing Association all have in common? It sounds like a setup for a joke. So my question is, what do they have in common, and why does it matter?
The one common denominator between these 3 institutions is that they have all recently employed cuteness as a publicity tactic, and specifically cute mascot characters that employ the anime aesthetic. And one of the important things about this is that for the most part, like, these have been relatively successful. It's almost like a similar phenomenon in advertising that we saw around 60 years ago in the 1960s with the conquest of cool, a phenomenon that the author Thomas Frank wrote about, and that actually helped inspire Mad Men. Whereas in Mad Men, they tried to make their ads cooler. They're trying to like make things cuter. It's clear indication that communication in the world of digital media and social media, things have changed quite drastically, right? These old institutions, they have to find new ways of reaching younger generations, or else they're basically going to fade into irrelevance. And this seems to be one way to do it.
Why would governments and legacy institutions want to invest or expand in their communication toolkits beyond what we think of as traditional diplomacy into areas like anime, as you mentioned, mascots, street art, video games? And that's a lot of work. Why do you think they're doing it?
Well, I think it's definitely related to the fact that younger people are far less likely to read traditional media sources like newspapers or cable news on TV. And so, to some extent, you have to kind of reach people where they are. The popularity of anime and related media like manga, anime style video games, it's highly correlated with the level of digitization. So, once you're on the internet, a lot of these different franchises, they kind of increasingly bleed into each other. And so by reaching people online with cute anime girl version of an aircraft carrier, the USS Hornet, the World War II warship, actually has at least three different anime girl mascots of it. The purpose of all of this is to kind of show young people that you get it, that your institution understands that, okay, newspapers or cable TV isn't particularly relevant to majority of people under the age of like, say, 30.
If I turn to you, Steve, your recent research looks at 2 decades of urban propaganda in China. What visual or thematic shifts have you seen over time, especially in how government uses aesthetics for political ends?
Brandon and I just wrapped up a study looking at 20 years of surveys of smaller back end streets in Shanghai and Beijing, looking to see in all the different districts and everything, how has political communication, propaganda, how has it changed over time? We found that actually there's more and more central government playing a role, things related to what Xi Jinping, China's leader, wants to talk about, strengthening China, things like that. But actually, one of the biggest things we noticed is about 20 years ago, there are these things popping up in political communication and in so-called public service ads or propaganda, and that's like cartoon characters or anime characters. And it's kind of struck me as strange. It didn't strike Brandon as strange, coming more from that generation, but it struck me as strange. And I'd be like, well, why is it? How are they using this? And to be clear, it's not Xi Jinping, the central government, using anime. It's local governments, and it's local governments mainly trying to reach out to young people to get their attention. And it's so mainly it deals with like public safety, like crossing the roads carefully, public sanitation, like disease awareness, washing your hands. There's more and more anime characters popping up, but they're playing a role of like informing mainly a younger generation. And in the West, in America, we do have a history of cartoon characters with something. Think about McGruff the crime dog, right? Or think about Smokey the Bear. So getting adults' attention is one thing, but getting children's attention, you need to come at something they recognize. And so our research is showing that even the Chinese government at local levels started this trend. Now the higher levels of government begin to go, wait a minute, if we're going to connect with people in China, we'd better come to using more like anime. In other words, bring cuteness in, because cuteness has been the dominant aesthetic that people have grown up with.
You bring in the cuteness. Are you seeing like political messages embedded in the cuteness, or is it just associating cuteness with the political party?
There are some instances where you actually do get cuteness on behalf of the party. On Netflix, you used to be able to watch a little cartoon show. Her name is Wu Baobei, a Chinese little girl with a large orange invisible bear who would go on these little adventures. Popular in England and the West, kind of like Dora the Explorer, but kind of like a Chinese version of it. Very popular in the West. We did notice that in China, she mainly plays a role like, hey, pay attention to traffic awareness, don't jaywalk, stuff like that. But there were a few times where local districts are like, hey, there's the model socialist worker that we all need to study, and Wu Baobei is telling us we need to be like that person. That's like a good example of how even the local government's going, hey, we need to bring them into more political matters.
You might have heard of the protests in Indonesia. The protesters are definitely quite young, and they've mostly been waving like a flag that looks kind of like a pirate flag. So that flag is sort of like cartoony skull with like a straw hat, and it belongs to the Straw Hat crew from One Piece. And it's sort of like a reference to the plot of the show because the characters fly that flag. They're a band of pirates who essentially defy a bunch of very oppressive autocratic kingdoms. It's sort of like a metaphor for what's going on with these oppressive governments in East and Southeast Asia. This visual language is sort of like reference that the Indonesian government kind of viewed the flag itself as some sort of political symbol, whereas it really is just like from a TV show, and an entire generation of people who grew up watching One Piece made the connection.
So, if you think about Japan's use of anime in public diplomacy, how would you compare that to how China uses the things we've been discussing, this public-facing art? Are they different? Are they the same?
At the end of the day, these are economic industries. And so a lot of the motivation behind promoting the industries is just good old fashioned economics. The animation industry, as well as related industries like manga, video game, these are all very important parts of their economy. And for China, increasingly so as well. As a side effect of that, you now have a generation of young people who are familiar with these franchises, with the visual language of anime. And the two are somewhat correlated in that sense. As far as where geopolitical competition between China and Japan goes, one example would be in mobile gaming. And this was a space where Japan mostly had a monopoly at the beginning. Then slowly China started gaining more success in the mobile gaming space, a lot more than they traditionally have in like good old-fashioned animation or like manga. The main point is that how these economic industries can segue into influence. It's very similar to sort of like how American cultural industries helped enhance American soft power during the Cold War.
Well, let's follow up on Elon Musk and X. So, and then also this recent suspension of Jimmy Kimmel over his comments about Charlie Kirk. These have raised concerns about who gets to control political speech online, where so many of us spend our time, especially our young folks. What do you think are the implications when major communication platforms are privately owned?
Not too long ago, there was a Pew study asking people in like 24 different countries around the world, what are the things that concern you the most in terms of like problems we're all facing? And one of the consistently highest ones was disinformation. So it's not just us, it's all around the world. People are really concerned with the quality information they're getting and not knowing, who it's coming from, especially in the American political environment where political contributions are masked because of this one Supreme Court decision. Some type of campaign reform, election campaign reform might alleviate some of that. But now we have a problem that we have the growth of these media conglomerates. You've got the people who are participating in TikTok, they also own these other media forms, traditional media, like newspapers. They also own TV groups. They also own radio. So we've had much less diversity in ownership of traditional media, but they're also getting into social media now. And so there's kind of a degree of power and influence that didn't really exist. I think you'd have to go back in time to look at William Randolph Hearst or Henry Luce, to look at private individuals who just had the ability to sway through information and selective disinformation as well. And I think that's the most concerning thing about Elon Musk and X, is that he has a very clear political agenda and it plays out in America, but he's also wants to influence British politics, German politics. That's why X has been banned in Brazil. And it's only America that has these tech media conglomerates at this level. They're so much larger than anything from Europe or from China. The Chinese government doesn't want to mix those both together. It's happy to rely on these companies as they are. My suspicion is the Chinese government is afraid of somebody who's able to combine those two. It has slapped down people like Jack Ma, who owned Alibaba.
Bilibili, for example, is one of China's major online video platforms. It's geared primarily, again, towards anime fans. The new CEO of Bilibili is someone that nobody's ever heard of, someone that a lot of people suspect is maybe planted there by the party. There's a lot of speculation online that they're trying to keep what could be a potentially independent source of power, like just make sure that things don't get too out of control.
That's a great example, Brandon. In our case in the United States, is that it's also that these are major political contributors, and in particular to this president. And this president himself, for the very first time probably, he is a master of social media. No matter what you think about him, the man is kind of a social media wizard. And he hires people His cabinet secretaries are almost hired according to their social media skills. The president is not putting out announcements from the White House about his meetings with Xi Jinping. We don't know what he talked about with Xi Jinping except what he put out on Truth Social, which is a media platform that he himself runs. It's not just that we have these conglomerates, we also have our leaders, our elected leaders, having their own media companies. And in this case, a president who is uniquely skilled at this.
Yeah, the lines really do get blurred. Given how central these social media platforms are to political discourse, you think they should be regulated more like public utilities are?
Yeah, I have to say, I think we should probably return to the concept of having more competition. But it's also true, just looking at economics and regulation in America, going back over the last 20 years, we've been allowing a lot of conglomerates. Our Fair Trade Commission basically has been hobbled for the last 20 years under both Democrat and Republican leaders. We have consolidations across many different sectors, airlines, finance. So it's everything. It's not just media. So it does raise a question, maybe we should have more competition. The FCC chairman has been criticized for weighing in and saying, hey, Jimmy Kimmel should be replaced, curtailed, whatever, stifled in some way, but it's their job since broadcasts, technically they're using broadcast logic here. You can only have a certain number of stations in a given area, otherwise they start drowning each other out. So there's a natural reason for government regulation, which is to maintain the commons. Not too many TV stations broadcasting over each other's wavelengths. Same thing with radio. They're using that argument to say our government has a role here to play in communication, and that's making sure everybody has fair access. If you take that argument and say, well, if there's only a few conglomerates owning everything, then people don't have fair access. I can see a future administration or Congress or who knows, maybe the Supreme Court saying this traditional principle of having a lot of competition in a sector should definitely be applied.
Let's have a final concluding question. I would love for both of you to weigh in on this. What would be a recommendation for us as citizens? What should we be paying attention to when we're consuming political content? Maybe we don't know we are because it's disguised as entertainment or culture.
When it comes to disinformation, one of the first big signs is if you're getting more and more content that's really just agreeing with you, you start consuming this stuff and close yourself into like this echo chamber, essentially, right? A lot of these social media platforms, they're kind of incentivized to kind of create these echo chambers because you're more likely to interact at a high level with people you agree with, either that or in the case of Twitter, sometimes they like smash together different echo chambers because that drives more engagement than a bunch of people that you agree with is a bunch of people that you violently disagree with. It's really making you feel an extreme emotion, whether positive or negative. There's a good chance that whether deliberately or not, there is some amount of disinformation going on here.
I wish I could say that there was like one easy step to try and like block or identify. My first thought is look under the hood, try and find out more. But it's so hard these days to figure out who's actually paying for what, especially when it comes to campaign season. It gets extra hard to do it. Most of this is coming through your smartphone. So take your smartphone, follow what the tech experts say, and disable all the connections of your apps to your contact list, to your GPS, to sharing any information across apps. And if you're not using the app, delete it. Become data privacy savvy. You can make it harder for these companies to share data about you. If that's true, then it becomes harder for this type of propaganda to become profitable, like Brandon was talking about.
Really good advice and important for us all to consider. Steve, Brandon, we thank you so much. This is Baker Briefing, where we make news make sense. The podcast is brought to you by Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy, which delivers nonpartisan policy research on the most pressing issues facing the U.S., Texas, and the world. Share your feedback and your guest or topic suggestions by emailing us at bakerbriefing@rice.edu. This episode was produced by Karina Zemmel and Shannon Moriarty. That's all for today. Thank you so much for listening.